Thank you very much. Great to see you all here. My name is Dyboski-Bryant. I'm the co-founder of Educators in VR, and I'm also the executive director of the Virtual World Society. And some of the work we do with Educators in VR, to start with, I've started about 4 years ago. On a whim, I had discovered that you can do events in VR, and all of the groups that I was looking at on Facebook, they were meeting in Facebook to discuss virtual reality, and I thought, well, why don't we do this in VR? So we started with one event, met my co-founder Laurel, who's in Seattle, and since then, since 2018, we've done 3,000 events on different platforms in virtual reality, and where I met Angelina Dayton.
Yeah.
And we ran Students in VR together. We'll be talking about Students in VR in a bit. My background is in education. I'm an English language teacher and trainer. And with VR, I've seen a lot of educational technology come and go, and a lot of it didn't really do it for me. Are we getting feedback? Cool. But for me, it's one of those stories, I don't know about you, virtual reality. I had one experience with it, and it changed everything overnight. I went to college, spoke to my manager. We need to do this in education. For me, I had a paradigmatic shift in a moment, and the last 4 years have kind of been riffing off that. So that's a little bit about me. Angelina.
So this is a really exciting time for me because Daniel and I have known each other for coming up on 3 years, and this is the first time we've met in person. Mm-hmm. Now, we have met in VR a number of times. We've met on Zoom a number of times. He's taller than I thought he was going to be. I am excited that I get to be here with all of you guys because I love the virtual experience, but I also like meeting people face to face. There's Robin, who I've never met in real life before. Actually, I've never met any of you guys, I think, in real life before. So feel free to reach out because we can connect on LinkedIn, but I'd really love to just meet you in person also. So my name is Dr. Angelina Dayton. I use the doctor all the time because I have a lot of student loan debt that apparently is not going to be forgiven, and so I'm going to use that doctor as long as I can. I have worked in education, K-12 and higher ed since, I've been in school my whole life, and I've taught mathematics in K through 12 and English in higher ed, and I was one of the first online teachers. Fun story, I went into a parent-teacher conference once with my second grader, and I said, oh, I'm an online instructor, and she said, oh, thank God, Carmen came in and said you did your job naked, and I didn't know what it was you did for a living, because the joke back then was you don't even have to wear clothes to teach online. Now it's Zoom, you have to at least have a shirt on, you don't have to have pants on. So I am very excited about putting people in VR for the first time. I've put close to about 30,000 people in VR for the first time. That's what I do. I'm known as the VR lady. I've gone around rural communities and taken headsets to schools and to my bank and to my hairstylist and to the volunteer out front who had never been in VR before and anybody that I can put in a headset because I'm really interested in how humans interact with computers. I'm an anthropologist by training, and Daniel and I met through Educators in VR and did Students in VR, but then Daniel came on as the interim director of Virtual World Society where I worked, and then he became executive director, but I joke and I tell him that I'm still going to introduce him as the guy who thinks he's my boss, even though now he's become executive director. We're going to talk a little bit, we don't want to take up too much time, but about kind of the frame that Educators in VR, Students in VR, and Virtual World Society take in order to ask different questions and get different answers. Right. And that's really what a paradigmatic shift is about. Can I switch to
Please.
the Laurel show you now?
Please.
I was giving a talk recently, and Laurel, our friend and coworker, she said, what do you do if a teacher says this? What do you do when somebody says they can't do that? And I said, let me tell you that most people are asking the wrong questions to begin with. And if we change the way we approach problems, solutions will come from that. And so when somebody says, well, how would I even do this in a classroom? I say, well, let's just talk about the things that are frustrating to you or that you see as hurdles and reframe them. Let's get rid of some of what I call foundational beliefs and start to build things up again. Not from the idea of static learning and static content and static mediums, but of dynamic, fundamentally ever-changing, iterative materials and content and mediums. And so we're going to talk a little bit more. We have about 15 minutes left. We tell a little bit more about ourselves and about some of the things that Virtual World Society is doing to kind of get people's minds to start to shift. But we really want to spend the last bit of the time. That's why we're down here. We're changing things up a little bit. Always question, everything's just a social construct. You can move around anything you want to move around. I really wanted to walk a little bit more, but they told me I might get feedback to come and talk to you guys a little bit more about how you're framing your questions and how we can reframe those from a different paradigm so that we get better questions, better answers, better solutions, and we change the way we teach and learn using virtual reality.
All right, quick question for you. Is anyone here an educator, teacher, trainer? Okay, wonderful. And next question, how easy are you finding it to use this in your teaching? Hands up if you find it very easy. Okay, cool. Some frustration, hands up at the back there. And more frustration than you expected. Anyone else? Yeah, okay. So with Educators in VR, we have about 3,500 members from around the world who are asking the same questions. And what we've discovered, once you actually get beyond how do I deal with the hardware, and you're dealing with the actual experiences of the content, now you're asking different questions. When we started this project, Students in VR, my idea was just to bring students together, but you did something different. You flipped it on its head. And this is something I think we can share not only when you're teaching in VR remotely, but also if you're doing it in your classroom, you get the students to answer their own questions. So we invite students in from around the world, and these students are running the events for us. They interview the speakers that we invite, they prepare the worlds, and our experience has been that that's the answer. You're asking the questions, how do I do this? How can we do this? The answer is, let the people that you're working with do it as much as you can. Leverage the people you're working with.
Get out of their way, I say.
Yes.
Sometimes there'll be ed tech that'll come into a classroom and the teacher won't use it because they don't know how. And so when I go in, I say, you don't have to, because with a YouTube video, a kid in 5 minutes, they'll show you how it's used. So you just need to get out of their way. They know how to get onto the internet better. They know how to. I once was at a school where they were able to bypass the firewall, use a proxy server, and then they were live streaming what I was doing in the classroom. The principal came in and said, Angelina, they are live streaming what's happening in here like it was bad. And I was all like, that's great. Most of your teachers can't even do that. That's amazing. And he was all like, it is? Yeah, it is. That's exactly what you want.
It's maybe also worth pointing out that virtual reality is going to be adopted, and already is being adopted in classrooms and formal education. And that's right, it's going to happen, should be that way. But there's another aspect that I think you and I are more interested in this, is the opportunity you have with virtual reality to go beyond the formal education structure of K-12 and education. Once you open up a 3D space and you can walk in and you can change that space and the students can change that space, you have a different palette of tools than you have sitting in a classroom with a textbook, maybe a laptop and a Zoom call. And we're trying to ask different questions, because if you go into this technology with the mindset as, how can I make this work in the classroom? Maybe that's how you need to solve it. Maybe that's your situation. You're an educator in a classroom, shaking your head. Maybe you don't. But we're excited about seeing communities in virtual reality of educators and teachers and trainers working only there. I don't know if you've seen the headlines recently. There are 10 metaversities about to be launched. Metaversities. These are universities that either have a digital twin or partly only exist on these social VR platforms. and they can have, it's a different business model. They can have students from Zimbabwe, from Tokyo, from Hong Kong, from Chicago, and the classroom only exists in VR. So then how are you teaching? You don't have course books. You need content.
They create it.
Yes, they can create it, absolutely.
You don't have to get it from a publisher.
Right.
They go out and find it themselves. When I first started teaching online, there was a lot of talk about, Angelina, is an online university really the same as a regular university? It's not even a question now for my kids. My kids take online classes all the time. But in the early days, there were really some questions about if we're not really there, is really teaching and learning going on? My daughter's in medical school right now, and last year during COVID, her medical school classes were on Zoom, which is something that you would never have thought was going to happen. I always tell the story that when I was working during the launch of Web 2.0, I said, people are going to start online banking. And this woman came up and laughed in my face and said, Angelina, you are crazy. That is never going to happen. I tell people, not my children's generation, not their children's generation, but I assure you, their children's generation, the idea of a schoolhouse will not be necessary in their minds. It started this time during COVID, when we weren't going to schoolhouses anymore. We have a whole generation of kids that don't feel like they need to go somewhere to learn anything. They learn it in their hand. Yeah. And by the time a few generations has passed, and I make the prediction that the idea of a brick and mortar school will be less common at the end of this century than it was all of last century. And people go, Angelina, you're crazy. And I'm like, well, we'll just see. Right. And virtual reality and these ideas of creating virtually anything you want anywhere with unlimited resources, I think you're going to see that our children and our children's children are going to see that as natural. And they're going to think, why do I want to go to a schoolhouse? Those places aren't even safe. They're going to be like, if I stay home, I won't catch lice. I don't know what they're going to say, but they won't feel the need. That doesn't mean that getting together doesn't happen anymore. We get most of our information, the children do, through watching videos and learning. That doesn't mean they don't read anymore. But reading is in service of other media consumption. One doesn't disappear. We still have radio, even though we have television. That's how media works. The evolution, we still have plays, but we also have movies. And so I want you guys to understand, I'm not saying something ends. I'm saying that something else comes up. It includes and transcends the previous medium. And that's how I want you guys to start thinking about it.
Yeah, while I was waiting, I saw a lady reading a book. And it just seemed so cool, like she's still reading a book.
I brought one on the plane.
I wanted to share an example of a paradigm shift in learning with you. So the Virtual World Society has just launched with our partners a global cash prize and virtual reality competition where teams will sign up to build virtual environments together, and they may be in the same place, they may be distributed, based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of these Sustainable Development Goals, and we're recruiting teams now to get together and build environments to raise awareness about these Sustainable Development Goals. Imagine you can assign your students this for extra credits, that they get access to a VR headset, and they're not, well, there are very innovative teachers doing all kinds of great stuff in the real world. But here you're having the students build worlds for other people to inhabit, to come and to visit and learn for extra credits. That wasn't possible before. You have the science fair projects where you're building stuff, and that's great, but you can't share it beyond that locality. Your students might be, submitting a team, building a project that people in China are going to visit, people in New Zealand are going to walk into your creations and have an experience that you've designed or your students have designed. That's just one example. So if you're interested in this Metaverse for SDGs prize competition, please find us at virtualworldsociety.org. It's free and open to take part. And this is a way we're contributing collective efforts and creativity to share globally, immersively. Yeah.
I really encourage people to be involved in that. It's a way, I say that you're either a content consumer a content contributor, or a content creator. Sometimes you dabble in a little of all of them, right? And our youths are very much content creators, right? And their media. And so giving them an opportunity not just to make me laugh when I'm scrolling through TikTok, but actually reflect on the world that they live in, how to make it more sustainable, and how to be a part of something larger. And they might even win a really large cash prize. And they'll get to see that other students across the world are doing the same thing. So it connects them to a larger conversation. Those are some of the ideas. It's not about, I mean, we don't lose the local. The local's still there, but it includes the local, and it also transcends the local. We have about 6 minutes left.
Yeah, just want to share one more thing. For those educators out there, if you're not already aware of Educators in VR, there's also an open global resource for students, teachers. We have about 3,500 members. We have an active Facebook group and a very active Discord community, and we are here for you. We started this to connect, collaborate, and share in virtual reality and on social media. And so if you're not sure where to start with virtual reality, you could do worse than find our website or our Facebook group and start up a conversation. Really, really friendly people. We're all in the same boat, and so why reinvent the wheel when somebody somewhere has done this, and you can, you know, have a conversation with them, find out what works. But fundamentally, I think once you realize how accessible it is to start creating in virtual reality, either because you're using a platform, you don't have to do coding. You don't have to use Unity.
I don't code.
I don't code. You can build very convincing experiences. We've got Jason Marsh here from Flow Immersive. He has a fantastic data visualization app. Yeah, you need to talk. That has a studio attached now as well, right? You can create your own experiences to a degree, right? Thank.
Flow editor is entirely web-based, and yes, it's created and it's open.
Right, a flow editor. If you have data sets, you can now spatially visualize this. And best of all, you don't have to do it because you can get your students to do it. Think like this,
Yes.
that the students can build the content. And by building, they're learning, but they're also generating the content.
You don't have to know everything.
Right. That's
You don't have to know everything. We have about 4 minutes left. I'm going to tell one quick story, and then I'll pass it off to you guys, which is I'm reading, I always push for people to read Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, where Thomas Kuhn talks about how there was kind of the shift when we learned about Ptolemy thought, you know, that the Earth was the center of the universe. And when that began to change, people were really upset. No, Earth, me, I'm the center of the universe, at least the center of the galaxy, at least the center of something, you know. It disrupted their belief system. And it was very hard, and it was very difficult for people to believe that they weren't the center. And I tell teachers, believe for a moment that you are not the center of learning. And I promise you it'll be easier. There's something a lot more out there. And so we have about 3.5 minutes left. You guys can, there's a mic. Thank you so much. And if you start off, I'm going to make a face if you start off if I have more of a comment than a question, because that always cracks me up. Anybody got a question or a comment question? There's one in the back.
Yeah,
yes.
back. Lovely.
I have to qualify my question because 6-second rule. I walked in towards the end.
It's all right.
I have to ask because my wife is a chemistry teacher, and we do virtual reality pilot training stuff, and she was all excited trying to do chemistry stuff, hit all kinds of resistance with cost and roadblocks. Does your content publish? We have Pico Neo 3 Pro. I mean, is it device agnostic?
Okay, so we don't have content. So you walked in late, but that's an excellent question because it's the question we get all the time. You know, what about cost? What about the resistance of, you know, is it device agnostic? So Daniel, do you want to answer it? Or do
No,
you
go.
Okay, so what we are pitching is a paradigmatic shift of thinking of things like books and curriculum development and thinking more about content creation within the classroom with the students.
Yeah.
And then that way, when the creation happens from within, you can do it however you want. So one of the things that happened in Cherokee Nation where I live is that my colleague went out and he gave a one of the state standards to a class and said, create an environment where we can learn this. Well, they learned the standard by creating the environment in just any old platform. Yeah. It happened to be Engage. Engage is good. We're going to pitch a whole bunch of stuff. Give us next time we give a talk. Give us your thing. We'll pitch you too. Engage, but it could have been any platform.
Can I add something?
And go ahead.
Yeah. So there are apps. There are companies that create content that you can buy specifically, and then there are platforms. Think of it like Zoom or Skype. It's like a virtual multi-user environment. And these tools have creation tools built in, so the students can go, they can bring in, I don't know, a rock, a tree, and they can build a garden. So we're not creating any content. That's not what we do. We use the tools for learning experiences.
Well, and by we, he doesn't mean me. He means those people. I don't do that. But what I do is I go and I tell teachers, you can create anything. Yeah. So you don't have to wait for somebody to provide anything for you. And this is the paradigmatic shift in thinking. Did we have another? We have a few minutes.
Else, please.
Robin.
So my question is, you talked about these 10 metaversities that are coming online, and some of them are digital twins. And I know Dr. Mars was talking yesterday about Morehouse, for example, which is in Engage, I guess, Victoria. Victoria XR. But what about the ones that are starting from scratch? Yeah. My question is, where do they get the content? And I know you just said y'all don't make it, but how do you know that the content that they're developing is reliable content? If that's a fair question, right?
It's a great question. Well, some of the same questions that we're getting now with VR, like what about credentialing and how do you know, were the same things we had when we started doing online teaching in general, right? And I would say, in all honesty, you don't know. You buy a software out there, it could be good, the salesman's good, it could be bad, you just don't know. And so there's a due diligence. And a lot of times we put on a headset and it's so sparkly and so great, and we just say, this is the greatest thing ever. And I tell all my teachers, Best Buy salesmen are not your friends. I teach them a lot of stuff. I go, that's the number one thing you have to learn. And so, no, there is a due diligence. Sometimes we're content consumers, sometimes we're contributors, and sometimes we're creators. When we're creators, we have to be ethical. When we're contributors, we have to be ethical. And when we're consumers, we have to be aware of what we're consuming. And part of that education is part of the education that we give to our children, just like we would with anything that they consume online. And ourselves and our teachers. Did you
want to add something? Yeah. What I would say, if you're lucky as well, as you're starting out now, when we consult universities and schools, if possible, try and allow yourself some time to play and explore and discover before you lock down. Right? If you're starting out, now's not the time to commit to a particular content, a particular tool or anything. You want your teachers and your colleagues and your students, this is a whole new paradigm.
So you're like creating your own kind of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
You could say that. You could say that. I mean, Wikipedia is on a whole different scale, but for the curriculum, that will be built individually, but we're having to explore what it looks like. A spatial curriculum, what does that mean? How do we deliver it?
We're going to get things wrong.
Yeah, if you can explore and discover and play, then you're not making any mistakes.
Playful learning. Playful learning.
Thank you guys so much for letting us come here and talk with you.
We sense your passion. Give them a round of applause. Thank you guys so much.